So some of the basic structures of the eye, just as a reminder, if you've been working on this a little bit, you pretty much have the basics down, but let's talk about a few of those things real quick. One of them is what we call the canter of the eye, and that is just the general tilt. This person that I'm doing here has an ever so slightly positive canter, meaning that the outside is slightly higher than the inside edge of the eye. Some people have a neutral, so it's straight across. Some people have a negative canter, so it tilts down at the outside. This one has a little bit of the slight positive. You need to look at the opening. Don't look at the eyelashes. Try really hard to ignore them. The eyelashes tend to make the eye look bigger. So you really want to focus in on the that inside edge, that inside shape of the eye. And then you gotta look and ask yourself, where's the curve at? Typically this area through here is often a little bit flatter. And then out here somewhere, usually you find that sort of center area, and you'll find that your upper one has a little bit more arch slightly in, and the outer one usually slightly out. It does vary from person to person, so you have to, use your eye and try to figure out the best you can for this particular person. Now I'm going to lightly go over these lines just a little bit because I don't want them to be too dark. I wanted you to be able to see it, but I don't want it to be too dark just yet. All right. Once I've got my eye established, there are some things that I start looking at. I take a look at this inside tear duct area. That's that fleshy part of the eye where when you cry, the water comes from. And I look at the iris and ask myself, how big is the colored part or the iris? Remember that this is a round circle. The upper part of it goes up underneath the eyelid. So if I were to take this circle and go all the way around, the upper part is underneath. The lower part, it depends on the person. Some people, you will actually see that lower part extend barely below that lower edge of the eye. For this person, it's just a hair above. And it may just be the angle that she's looking at us. But kind of get that in there. And then I have to figure out where the pupil is, and the pupil sits in the center of that iris. So once I've kind of thought about where that iris is, then I can work on the pupil being in the center of that circle. And it's round, a perfectly round circle. You also have a lid crease. This is greatly affected by your weight, your age, your race, different things like that. People who are heavier or older tend to have a crease that is a little bit lower, and it's because the upper eyelid kind of pushes down on it, and so you end up with a crease that's a little bit lower, a little bit closer to the top edge of the eye. And then you got to look at your eyebrow. How close. And I try to make my outline very light just so I know where it is, because I'm going to darken it in, but I don't want to color it in. So those are just some of the key thoughts. You can start wherever you want. I often will start with a very dark pencil, and I will get that pupil set where I want it. Sharp pencil helps. And then I start looking at the iris around it. This person has a blue eye, but the very outside edge of the eye, no matter what color your eye is, it will always have this dark ring around it. And a lot of times it's a dark blue ring. Even if your eyes are a different color, a lot of times that outside ring will actually be a really dark blue. And I always do my shading, my marks, in a direction that goes from that outside in towards the pupil, because that is the natural pattern that occurs in our eyes. We have this kind of what I call a starburst effect, or a firework. And then you often have another little sort of dark corona, I guess you could call it, that comes out from the iris, or from the pupil. Upper edge of the eye gets a shadow from the eyelashes. So it makes that top edge of the iris itself very dark. Now I'm going to get a little bit lighter pencil, so maybe a B, and start working on that inside value range. And I work back and forth as I do something like this. I'll usually have a couple of different pencils that I use. And then I'll move on into my next area. I'm back to the B here. So the white of the eye and the shine, those are going to be your lightest things. Now here is an area that I actually like to use a little bit of a blender. And I won't use it in the iris because I want that design crisp. I want it sharp. So I generally won't use it in the iris itself. But I like it to smooth out some of the shading in the corner as it blends down. When kids start using blenders, actually one of the biggest things that happens is they overblend. In other words, they'll start just like blending everything. And you don't really want to do that. Same thing as I move into the area around the eye, I will establish my shading. Pay attention to my darkness and lightness with my pencil. Way back, holding my pencil way back at the back, tilted way over on the side. The only area that I will maybe use a blender for this is probably in the skin or inside that white of the eye. But the first thing that I'm going to do is go through with my pencils, and I'm going to establish the different values from the lightest part of the skin to the darkest shadows. And I just slowly start to build my value a little at a time. Skin isn't white. Try to remember that. Sometimes I just will lay in my lightest value. So I'm going to get a really dark pencil here. It's a 4B. And I'm just going to lay in the eyebrows. And the eyebrows generally will follow a specific pattern. Towards the inside of the eye, they tend to be more up. So you got to pay attention how dark, how thick. Just got one stray one out here that's a little bit wild. And notice that I am not coloring in I'm not just coloring in the sort of loose outline that I gave myself. She has a really thick eyebrow. It's kind of funny, you look back in history and you will see time periods when pencil thin lines were like popular and all the women like tweezed the snot out of their eyebrows. And in the last few years, bushy, full eyebrows are very in. As you get towards the center of the eye, the eyebrow starts to lay more sideways, or the hairs in the eyebrow start to lay more sideways. All the way across the eyebrow tends to go from the base in the general direction that eyebrow is. So as it comes out here, you'll see that some of those lines go very sideways, maybe even a few down. And then your center of your eyebrow. And up in here, we have a few lighter eyebrows that are actually coming down in. and defining that upper edge. Eyebrows are typically more sparse, meaning not as thick out towards the edge. A lot thicker right in this half. But I can still see some skin underneath. Eyelashes have kind of a curl to them. In towards the center, you start at the eyelid, take it down just a little bit for a little loop, and then up. They don't need to be identical in length. Don't even try to make them. But do pay attention to generally how long they are. Right towards the middle, they start to do a little loop that's a little bit more straight up and down. And they get thicker. And then as they roll to the outside, you get a little bit longer of an arch to them. They get a lot thicker out towards the outside edge. And I just find it easier to turn my book. Keep a sharp pencil when you are working with something like eyelashes. The lower lid is a little different. Instead of coming from the lid line, it's slightly outside of that. And it's just the angle. We can see the thickness of the lower lid. We can't of the upper one. So the upper one, it looks like it's coming, you know, directly from where the eyelid meets the eye, but it's actually not. It's actually coming a little bit lower, or a little bit out from there, which you can really see with the lower ones. But it's sort of the same thought process. You have that little arc to it. And she's got pretty long lower eyelashes, the model that I chose, but typically the lower lashes are a lot shorter and thinner. But they do follow the same rule as far as which direction the arc goes. She also has eyelashes really that extend very far in. Most people, your eyelashes stop right about here. And hers actually comes in a little further. She's probably got some fake lash additions. And I want to make this outside. Just a little longer. There are different blenders that you can use. I like using Q-tips, especially for like skin, but for things like the fold in the eyelid, I like the tortillons. You can get a much finer line with those. Now, any blending I do here, I'm going to be very careful that I don't accidentally blend out the definition of my eyelashes.